Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Plant-Powered Metro New York's live stream series, Nutrition Heroes in Healthcare. I'm Lianna Levine Reisner, the Network Director of Plant-Powered Metro New York, which empowers people in and around New York City to live their best and healthiest lives with whole food, plant-based nutrition. Over the next few weeks, we're talking to some of the people in your neighborhood who are bringing food to the forefront in healthcare. Each of our featured guests is deeply knowledgeable about the power of whole plant foods in health and healing. So we're going to explore their journeys, expertise, and pioneering projects that are changing how physicians approach patient health and the future of healthcare. Later in the hour, I'll be taking questions from the comment feeds on Facebook and YouTube, so please feel free to share them as we move along. This week, I am so pleased to introduce you to Dr. Richard Rosenfeld. Dr. Rosenfeld is the Distinguished Professor, Chairman, and Program Director of Otolaryngology at SUNY Downstate Health Sciences University. He's also the Vice Chair of the SUNY Distinguished Academy Executive Board and Chairman of the Board for the Auditory Oral School of New York. In addition, Dr. Rosenfeld co-founded and chairs the SUNY Downstate Committee on Plant-Based Health and Nutrition. Dr. Rosenfeld, welcome.
Thank you, Lianna.
So could we start off just by sharing a bit about your journey? What was your path to medicine, and specifically to the field of otolaryngology, which for our listeners who aren't aware, you're an ENT doc, an ear, nose, and throat doctor.
Well, first, thank you. I'm exceptionally impressed that you pulled off otolaryngology without a hitch. That's a tongue twister.
Classically trained singer here. I've heard from my colleagues who have otolaryngologists who they go to.
Yeah. So, and it's a thrill to be here. I certainly don't view myself as a nutrition hero, but I'm delighted to be put in that light, and hopefully we'll share some meaningful experiences. But you asked about medicine, and it was an interest when I was young. Had no idea what I wanted to do. Ear, nose, and throat seemed interesting because you play around with lots of different senses and things. And I do pediatric ear, nose, and throat clinically, which I really enjoy. You know, you make kids feel better with a lot of the things you do, things in the office, things ambulatory surgery, and sometimes just a little reassurance. And for the past 12 years or so, I've been the department chairman at SUNY Downstate in Brooklyn, where that's been a real thrill because you can really, I think, make a difference. We have a residency training program. It's a major healthcare institution where I get to interact with lovely people like you and plenty of others. So it's been an interesting journey to medicine and a completely separate journey to the plant-based and lifestyle areas.
Great. We'll get to that shortly. I'm curious what brought you to SUNY Downstate Medical Center in the university, and maybe if you could share some memorable moments from your tenure there.
So SUNY Downstate is part of the 64 campus state system. It's the largest state university system in the country. I could come up with all sorts of great things and reasons why I came, but it's very simple. It was the only way I could get back to the New York City area in 1992. And I probably would have been divorced if I didn't get back to the New York City area. So it was very simple, SUNY Downstate or big trouble. So, but I came with trepidation because there was no pediatric ENT in the borough at that time. It was a fairly new discipline. And the program there had just been started by my precedent chairman, Frank Lucente, and it was up and coming. But I love it. I love Downstate. I love Brooklyn. I think Brooklyn is the land of opportunity with 130 different languages and cultures that exist. And the SUNY system, it has its moments as a state system. It can be frustrating, but it also has lots of great things. You know, I tell people that come, you need those little bit of rose-colored glasses to get past some of the warts and blemishes in different parts of New York and Brooklyn. But once you do, it's a wonderful place. I've been there almost 30 years, and I really enjoy every moment of it. You asked about some memorable moments, and Probably memorable one was when I got to hire my first assistant, the second pediatric ENT person, because we were so busy after a year, Ari Goldsmith, and a few years later, Naira Goldstein, who's still there. And a real memorable point is when I took over as chairman. And that was about 12 years ago. And I also took over the residency training with trepidation. I've done a lot of things in my life that I had no idea how to do until I got into the role of doing them. But I generally find if you're astute, listen to feedback, do your research, and be humble, you can pull things off. And I think being the program chair, program director within the field of ENT has been a real thrill. The last memorable moment is becoming a distinguished professor, which is the highest academic rank in the system. And that led to my role as a vice chair of the Distinguished Academy, which represents about 1,000 of the most accomplished professors in the SUNY system.
That's incredible. Can you say a little bit more about the research that you've done at Downstate since your tenure there?
Yeah, research to me is just an exercise in critical thinking. It's a way to move from an observation to a generalization, to really take something you see and try and learn from it and then help others as well. So I've published about 350 papers and book chapters since I've been there. I've written a number of books, and I've really engaged with our National ENT Academy. So I've been the lead author of many of the national guidelines in the field that deal with a lot of pediatric conditions. Authored guidelines on cleaning earwax, on managing sinus problems, on hearing issues. So it's been pretty diverse, and those publications nationally get a lot of attention. And that research in methodology began with my public health degree back in 1989 to 91, which was followed more recently a few years ago by a master's in business, and most recently by board certification in lifestyle medicine. So I've been able to apply those skills to other organizations, such as the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, where we're doing wonderful consensus work now on type 2 diabetes. But, and research gets you around the world. I've been to about 30 countries. I've given well over 1,000 lectures in 4 different languages. And, it's a wonderful way to meet people, see people, and I think make a difference if you do it right.
Absolutely. Can you share a little bit about who your mentors have been in the field and how they influenced your career path?
Yeah, of course. I think we all absolutely have mentors. Going back to my residency training, it was Hugh Biller, who was the chair, a master head and neck surgeon. And during my fellowship, Charlie Bluestone, who was established one of the first pediatric ENT programs in the world, and was renowned for his work with otitis media, which are ear problems in kids, which is something I've carried on to this date. It's an area of clinical focus. Other real influential folks, my ex-chairman where I am now, Frank Lucente, was a real mover and shaker. He could get things done, and he was fearless and really just took on any challenge. I think presently, I've really learned a lot from, I consider the mentors, all the people I've worked with on lots of guidelines, consensus products, because I learn every time I do it. And, you get this wonderful feedback. And people recently, I'd say one of my sons have been mentors too, because they're always teaching me new things. And one of them in particular, Daniel, my youngest, is the one that put me on the plant-based lifestyle medicine path. So I think we're always learning.
That's great. Can you share a little bit about that path? How did he bring it to your attention? How did you start to learn about the field of Buddha's medicine?
Yeah, that's interesting. And I was always, I did a lot of weight training when I was young and bodybuilding, and was sort of a semi-vegetarian for most of my life. Little bits of chicken, fish, occasional pastrami sandwich, corned beef, but, tried to eat reasonably healthy, but there was processed and junk food in there too. And then Daniel, my youngest, who's now into year 4 of a PhD at UCLA in social psychology, he went off to Cornell his first year and came back and said, Dad, I think I'm going to try this vegan stuff for a while. And we're like looking at him like, are you crazy? Oh my gosh, what's next? He says, oh, it's only going to be for a month. All right, go ahead. So about, I guess, 8 or 9 years later, he's still vegan. His 2 other brothers, twin brothers, who are a year and a half older, are now vegan as well. And so am I. And that came about initially through reading some of T. Colin Campbell's work, the China study, and then getting into Michael Greger, How Not to Die. And as a person with a research science background, I've always been involved with systematic reviews, meta-analyses. I'm an editor for the Cochrane Group. I train people on that. I started doing the research and was really amazed at the benefits. Probably most importantly, at a certain point, I realized my kids are probably going to take another 50 years to get married and have grandchildren. And if I wanted to be around, I'd better do some healthy habits. So that was a motivating factor as well. And one thing led to another, losing some weight, eating whole plant foods, started running. I never ran in my life because I had shin splints after losing about 20 pounds. I said, gee, I can run. And now I do marathons. I've got 2 coming up. So it's been an incredible journey, and a journey that's blossomed through sharing it with others and working with you in some of the work we're doing at Downstate that I'm sure we're going to talk about soon.
Absolutely. I'm curious if we could go back and talk about your identity and your path as a bodybuilder. I remember some incredible photos that you shared at the last Downstate conference on plant-based nutrition. Can you say more about what drew you into bodybuilding and how this area of fitness, is it connected to your
Sure.
career in medicine?
And that's a key mentor that I left out, my dad, who in the 1960s was into weightlifting. And he had some barbells and dumbbells at home, a bench. And, I remember getting into this when I was about 12, 13, 14 years old and, starting to put on some muscle. It was in the days when Arnold Schwarzenegger was just starting his Mr. Olympia run. You had Lou Ferrigno, the Hulk, and Franco was there. There were all these, later classics in the field. And I just did it because it felt good and gave some good results. I was never a real athlete when I was young. Went off to college and continued to do some heavy lifting and bulking up with my fraternity brothers. But, then life kind of hits and you drift along. Gained, maybe a good 25 pounds from my college weight. Was getting close to about 160, about 20 pounds from college. And, about 6-7 years ago, said enough is enough and really started to eat healthy, whole food, plant-based, lose the weight, work out regularly, and trickle down with the body weight. So there's a balance between running and bodybuilding. You simply cannot put on muscle if you're running more than 20, 30 miles a week. And I'm in my 60s, so my goal is to maintain muscle and not lose it. But if you eat right and you get your body fat down pretty low, you can still look pretty ripped, even if you're an old guy. And, those photos are online and some of the lectures, people can access them. And I constantly tease the residents and medical students with my 8-pack and challenge them to see theirs.
Fantastic. Going back also, it's incredible that you've begun to be a runner at this stage and to do marathons as well. Tell me a little more. When you adopted a healthy plant-based lifestyle, how did it feel in your body, and what really compelled you to start running and moving more?
Yeah, I can't say there were dramatic feelings initially, and it was a 4 or 5 year transition to being fully whole food plant-based, meaning, really sticking to minimally processed, legumes, fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, um, whole grains, and healthy things, avoiding all the processed food, completely eliminating oil from cooking, refined grain, sugars, etc. That was a path that took a long time. I'd say about halfway into that path, getting more towards the whole food plant-based, I noticed I was feeling better. I was more alert. I didn't get the micro sleep where you'd sort of fall asleep in meetings, or God forbid while you're driving. That sort of disappeared. Um, Before doing all this, when I would get a cold, it would typically last 2 to 3 weeks and go through stages of voice loss and sneezing and coughing, etc. And now I get a cold, I barely know I have it. I could sneeze twice one day and say, oh, I probably have a cold, and the day later I'm fine. It's been exceptionally rare to have any illness of consequence, thank goodness, since I started doing this. So you feel great, you have more energy, you can concentrate more. And the key thing with running was I'd never done it in my life. I noticed I could run a bit after losing some weight. I was late for a meeting. I ran 5 or 6 blocks, and I said, hey, I can do this. And I'm like, not out of breath. And over the years, again, you got to be smart about it. I had a lot of injuries the first year or two, nothing serious, but it takes time to learn, and you really got to listen. I love the Peloton, studios. I've done about 1,500 Peloton classes by now. I've read many books on the topic, subscribed to magazines, look at things online, and now I run about a solid 50 miles a week. I think I've gotten into a very good routine. I'm pretty fast for an old guy. I've done marathons in 3:49, a half marathon in 1:40. And I've, got 2 coming up, one in September, and then in November, I'll be running the New York Marathon on behalf of a student-run clinic at Downstate, the Brooklyn Free Clinic, to do some fundraising. So, yeah, I never viewed myself as an endurance athlete, but I guess now I am. That's been an interesting a change.
That's really remarkable. I love it. Can you share with our listeners some examples of how you fuel your 50 miles a week? What do you eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
Well, I typically for breakfast most days will have a cereal, some sort of a muesli or a natural cereal with no added sugar. So it's a lot of oat and natural grains. The Ezekiels are great, the sprouted cereals. So that's the base. I'll add in a couple tablespoons of ground flax seeds, some hemp hearts that are ground, and then either some nuts, some dried fruit, some cacao nibs, white mulberries, or different types of nuts and seeds. Then I'll add some fresh fruit, usually a banana plus some berries. Berries are great. And some plant-based milk, almond milk. And that's a great breakfast. For lunch, if I'm out and about, then you got to find places where you can put healthy plant-based foods together. So some of the Mediterranean places like Cava, or some of the taco places, you can make nice bowls with beans and things. You just got to watch out for the sodium, which isn't too much of an issue if you run. Or if I have more control over things, I'll have a salad and add in things. And I'm notorious for having little tiny Ziploc bags loaded with beans. So I'll have black beans or chickpeas or lentils or pinto beans in a little bag, or cannellini beans. And I'll show up in a restaurant, and when no one's looking, I'll add it to my salad, my soup, a curry, or even pasta. And now I've got a healthy dish. So I've added the protein and the fiber. For dinner, it could be pastas, sauces, salads, usually things I'll make on my own. I love Indian food, and there's a lot of great South Indian food you can eat. Again, focusing on the whole grain roti instead of a puri or a naan. And it just takes some thought and effort. But you can do it. I'm fearless about adding in a few things here and there. I'll go out for Italian. I'll get the whole wheat pasta, and I'll bring a little container with some nutritional yeast or a plant-based substitute for Parmesan cheese and go to town. So, and we have lots of stuff on the website for people who want to learn how to do these things.
That's
And
great.
cooking without oil, 100%. Never use oil.
I love it. And I love your example of the beans in a bag. We all have our own hacks. And I know packing for my kids, I always have to think, what am I going to take that's going to be easy and quick? I love that idea. Can you share, have there been any particular challenges that you've faced in adopting and maintaining a plant-based diet?
Most of the challenge is traveling. And before COVID, I did a lot of traveling, lecturing, speaking. And, you'd be a little at the mercy of what's there. But I conquered that by, whenever I would go somewhere, the first thing I would do is locate a Whole Foods or a natural place. I'd go buy a couple of cans of beans. I'd buy some fruit, some nuts, and I'd immediately go about dividing the beans up into some, tiny Ziploc snack bags, so I could carry those around with me and add them to whatever I was eating, and other vegetables and things as well. I'd get some whole grain wraps that I could use instead of bread. But traveling was a challenge, and cooking without oil, I think, is a challenge too. And until you discover parchment paper and learn that you can make, great things. We just had a 4th of July feast at my house. We had about 15 people over, and I made 7 dishes all without oil, including different sauces and things. Even a focaccia I made without oil. I substituted applesauce for the oil, and it came out just fine. But you can learn. And it's challenging, and there are times where you have to make exceptions. But I think you can, with just a little discipline and planning, you can stick to it.
Fantastic. How has this changed how you practice medicine? I'm not sure if you're seeing patients at all anymore, but especially in the field of otolaryngology, where children have many issues with sinuses and immune system issues. How have you internalized what you've learned and brought it back to your field?
Well, I've always been a big believer in minimal intervention, natural history. I rarely prescribe antibiotics or anything. I think many of the diseases that young kids have are self-limited, and as their immune system grows, it gets better. And I'll, talk to people about the kids' diet. There's a colleague of mine, Julie Way, in Florida, came up with something called milk and cookie disease, which she feels is related to excessive dairy and sugar products that give kids a lot of congestion, nasal sinus issues, ear infections, throat infections, etc. So I think cutting back on the milk and cookies, the refined sugar, helps. But kids are tough, and there's extremely limited data on eating healthy and whole food plant-based things in children. The exception would be, there's a lot of obesity and kids who are overweight, and there's a real opportunity, I think, to talk about healthy eating. But I can't say it's changed my practice much. It's changed my lecturing. I'm giving lectures to all sorts of people I never spoke to before, medical departments, endocrinology. Probably the most interesting was a lecture about 3 weeks ago to a group of Tibetan monks on eating healthy. And this was arranged as an exchange program through Emory University. One of our medical students is involved with, and he asked me to give them a lecture. I said, okay, great. So I had about a dozen robed Tibetan monks on Zoom, and we talked about eating healthy for an hour. And I've been to all sorts of other places. So it's opened up a new venue to interact with. In American College of Lifestyle Medicine, I've been very active too. So I can't say it's changed the medical practice that much, but it's changed my life in terms of the things that make medicine interesting and the people I interact with now. And including your group, and then of course the Brooklyn Borough President's Office, Eric Adam, who's a huge proponent, and Rachel Atchison and her crew.
Fantastic. So tell us more about what motivated you to start SUNY Downstate's Committee on Plant-Based Health and Nutrition. Why did you think Downstate should come together over this? And what were your initial goals?
Well, I like to say there's some huge cosmic plan, but at the time I was the president of the medical and dental staff, and one thing you can do is create committees. So I said, gee, let's create a committee on plant-based health and nutrition. Wouldn't that be fun? With the hope that it could bring people together and produce some change. But in all seriousness, you create a committee, you need a committee charge and your plan, and that's actually available on our website. One of the main things I wanted to do was see if we can get the medical leadership to rally around the concept of food as medicine, that eating a whole foods, plant-based diet, consisting of fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, nuts, seeds, that this type of a diet could lead to health, that it could control, even reverse certain chronic diseases such as type 2 diabetes, obesity, high blood pressure, hypercholesterol, and some others, even some cancers. So the goal, initially, was to get the Medical Executive Committee at University Hospital of Brooklyn to endorse a fairly detailed position statement. And we formed the committee. I put together this statement after research. If you go right off, now we were official. The medical leadership signed off on this concept that eating plants can cure disease and make you healthy. Wow, that was cool. And then we formed a committee, and it was a broad reach. I initially thought we'd get a lot of doctors, but very few doctors. It's mostly public health, some epidemiology, public health folks, a lot of nursing. Allied health is well represented, medical students, both from public health, nursing, allied health professions, as well as some medical students. They've been great. They've really run with this stuff incredibly. But very few docs, to my surprise, and even some lifestyle folks and coaches and private folks have joined in. PPMNY has been part of this, and we've partnered with the Borough President's Office. So that's been really fantastic, but the somewhat lack of interest of physicians to me has been perplexing and of concern.
Yeah, can we unpack that a little bit? It's been interesting to watch, of course, as we do our work and try to engage with physicians as well, that it's sometimes a harder sell to clinicians, perhaps because they're busy, but what is it about, have you seen pushback, or has it just been sort of more of the silence? And when you have gotten pushback, what does that entail?
So I'm going to steal from Michael Greger here with his analogy of smoking. So in the 60s, when the Surgeon General came out and said, smoking causes cancer and it's not good for you, based on a lot of research, the medical profession was skeptical. Even the AMA took years to come around. Why were they skeptical? Why? Because most doctors smoked. And if you're a smoker, you're not about to go telling your patients that smoking is killing you while you're busy smoking. Eventually they came around, and we jumped to today where, nirvana for many docs is getting taken out to an expensive steakhouse by some pharmaceutical company or other instrument manufacturer to wine and dine them and build their ego. Meat has a huge industry behind it, as does dairy and fish and pork and everything. So when you have the vast majority of physicians out there eating their steak, their fried food, their creamed spinach, their French fries, lots of chicken and fish, and being told even on food pyramids, this is what they should do, and it's what they do, are they about to get out there and tell their patients, hey, eat whole food plant-based and you'll be healthy, when I do the exact opposite? It reminds me of the so-called meat guidelines that came out about a year and a half ago in Annals of Internal Medicine. And what happened is they basically came out with guidelines that said, yeah, reducing by 3 servings a week your meat intake doesn't make a difference in your health. Okay. They were nice enough to disclose the authors, and of the 13 authors, 12 were regular meat eaters, and about half of them ate a lot of processed meat. There was a token pescatarian who was the methodologist. So is a group of meat eaters about to do research showing that what they're doing is bad? No. And it's a question of substitution. It's not just reducing meat, it's what you substitute it with. If I stop eating meat and add a couple of Twinkies to my diet every day, I'm not going to show a health benefit. But if I eat healthy, I will. Same thing with olive oil. Olive oil is not healthy. Mediterranean diet, it's nonsense. It's not the olive oil that's healthy. It's the fact that you've substituted olive oil for bad things, such as red meat, processed meat, highly processed refined foods. In that context, yeah, olive oil's better. But you do even better if you got rid of the olive oil and just ate a whole lot of whole food, minimally processed or unprocessed plant foods. So I think I rambled a bit there, but maybe, and the research is I think reaching a tipping point. The other aspect of this is research, and this is the last point I'll make, is that doing research on health eating is very, very difficult. There's so many factors that go into these outcomes, including genetics, that to do randomized trials, the pinnacle of research, is difficult. So we rely on a lot of these cohort observational studies, but there's literally millions of participants in them, and they've used very sophisticated dietary surveys and questionnaires that I think the evidence is pretty overwhelming as to the benefits of, plant-based eating. And I think we're at a tipping point that things are going to turn in the next few years as docs do get on board and start eating healthier. And COVID, I think, was a wake-up call for this.
Absolutely. I was going to ask you about, in the field of lifestyle medicine, for those who are not aware, the American College of Lifestyle Medicine is what Dr. Rosenfeld was referring to before, which is a professional association for clinicians across the country who have found not only the power of food as medicine, but other lifestyle factors. Can you share a little bit more about what you've been involved with through the ACLM and what you find most exciting about the field? And it might be even beyond food itself.
Right. So it's this concept of lifestyle medicine. The American College of Lifestyle Medicine was founded about 16 years ago, so it's fairly new. And they started a board certification process about 6 years ago. But what lifestyle medicine is, it has at the center healthy eating. So that's really a focal point. But around that are other lifestyle behaviors that lead to health and longevity. Getting restful sleep, roughly 7-8 hours a night is really the sweet spot. Having adequate physical activity. The US guidelines now about 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity is sort of the low end. Adding in some resistance work is also helpful. Then the really positive social relationships are important. Stress reduction, which includes mindfulness as part of it, avoiding risky substances such as smoking and, moderating your alcohol intake. These are all aspects of lifestyle behaviors that will ultimately lead to not just living long, but being healthy. And if you look at the blue zones with Dan Buettner, you'll find that in the spots around the world with disproportionate centenarians, you do have a lot of these lifestyle behaviors predominate. Within that context is having a real purpose in life is very important, to know why you're here, a personal mission statement of purpose. So that field is very appealing, and I was introduced to some of their leadership by Rachel Atchison from the Brooklyn Borough President's office. And it turns out that my experience in methodology in public health, knowing how to do clinical practice guidelines, expert consensus products, was very appealing. So I joined their research committee a few years ago, became involved as an expert consultant, and we have now just about finished our first expert consensus product, which is really fascinating. And it's a product basically coming out with the conclusion, not just among lifestyle medicine folks, but diabetologists, endocrinologists, internists, nutritionists, dietitians, that you can actually reverse and put into remission type 2 diabetes in adults with nutrition as a primary intervention with diet. I mean, that is a really groundbreaking thing to agree upon. There's a lot of nuance to it. And we'll hopefully have a publication on this in the next 6 months. But that's a project I've been involved with for about a year with them. We're looking at other projects too. And they have lifestyle medicine interest groups, which our students started at Downstate. I've been advising for that. That's been a wonderful experience. And I became board certified in lifestyle medicine about 9 months ago. I sat for the boards, which is something not a lot of people have done. I think there's 2 ENT folks at this point, but they're really seeing exponential growth in interest. And it's a fascinating group because it brings together docs from all different specialties, disciplines, who are interested in lifestyle. It transcends. It's a transcendent concept, which I think is fascinating in medicine, and I find it very exciting.
That's great. And I think as you talk about the sort of interdisciplinary nature of the research and the kinds of work that you've been involved with, and also just reflecting on the Downstate Committee and the work that's coming out of the university, all of the medical students and the graduate students there are just coming from incredible places, and the diversity of the student body is fantastic. I'm feeling like there's just a lot of new ideas coming to the surface through this collaboration, and that's been a wonderful thing to observe as an outsider, but I wonder how that's impacting the nature of the work that you're doing on the ground.
Well, it impacts us because it's a feedback loop. And even we have a group at Downstate. There's about 90 clubs that the medical students have. One of them is called DINE, D-I-N-E, the Downstate Initiative on Nutrition Empowerment. It's a great group of students. We've been working for years to get a garden, a healthy vegetable garden going at Downstate. And after the usual bureaucracy of working with facilities management and leadership, we actually have a garden now. It's going to be imminent. It's going to be outdoors. We have the funding for it. The medical executive committee has supported it. It's going to be a fabulous thing for the students. So things like that, they just feed back to you, and it's like, wow, this is great. As you mentioned, the committee is exceptionally diverse. Reminds me we should schedule a meeting in the next couple of weeks. And it's even starting to have an influence on the curriculum. And I think that's the key. And we talked a little bit before about, well, gee, why don't docs know about this or care about it? Part of it's that they don't learn about it. And T. Colin Campbell will be the first to tell you that the nutritional curriculum in medical school, it's all based around macronutrients, protein, carbohydrate, fiber, micronutrients, vitamin deficiency states. Nobody talks about food as medicine. This concept that just eating whole, healthy, plant-based foods, minimally refined and processed, will prevent disease when done the right way. We don't talk about that at all. So with the help of the Borough President's Office, we had a grant to start a Food as Medicine initiative where we developed a 3-hour online course with the T. Colin Campbell Institute on food as medicine. We worked with a nonprofit group called the Gaples group to use their course. And now we have 100 students, 50 public health, 50 College of Medicine, enrolled to take these courses and give us feedback. And the T. Colin Campbell version we can make available to everyone. It's unrestricted. So that's fabulous. And even the dean of the College of Medicine, I had met with him last week to discuss some of these initiatives, was so excited about it. He put me in touch with the vice dean for education, and going forward, as we update our curriculum, we're going to include a lot of this in the curriculum. So it's really been an interesting journey, how it all feeds on each other and can ultimately lead to change.
That's tremendous. It really is. Can you tell us what's on the horizon for the committee?
Well, I think it's time to start planning our next in-person conference. We had one 2 years ago. You were a part of that, and that was recorded. It's available on our website, which for those with an interest is www.downstate.edu/plant-based. I don't know if someone wants to put that in the chat, but you can go there and see the conference. That conference has garnered, as of last check, about 640,000 YouTube views on the Downstate channel. For context, the next closest video in the past 15 years that they've had the channel is about 50 or 55,000 views. So it's incredible, the interest. So we're going to start planning, I think, soon for an in-person event in the spring, which I think will be fabulous. Certainly, I've become a lot more enmeshed in the field since then. We all have more experience. Even your group, Plant Powered Metro New York, has grown. Some of the borough initiatives, which may become citywide initiatives depending on election, that might help too. And now I have some roots with ACLM and others, so I think that's very exciting. We want to get the garden going a bit more. We want to do the regular work of the committee, which involves, as you know, evidence reports and research articles. Research is starting to take off. Beth Helsner, my co-chair, who's the interim of epidemiology at the public law, very exciting research project she's looking to get off the ground. And, I think we'll continue to do the community outreach, working in the community, giving lectures, and it's organic. We have our mission, we keep growing, and we'll respond to the needs, which is what makes it exciting. There's no pre-planned agenda. I think we go, and the students have been a big part of that. Really, much to my surprise, their initiative has really been a real blessing and help.
That's wonderful.
The other thing we have to do is make change in the cafeteria at Downstate, the Sodexo group, which has been involved in our garden. But during COVID, it's been tough. With restricted folks on campus, I was told they have to cater more to what they want than not necessarily what they should eat. But there's a lot of willingness to change and work there too going forward.
That's fantastic. I'm going to take a question from the chat right now. And Desiree from Facebook asks, what are your thoughts on a plant-based diet lowering the odds of severe COVID-19 infection? She's heard about some new research that suggests that a nutrient-dense diet could be protective.
Well, it's a great question. We don't have research on the effect of a plant-based diet, but we do have lots of evidence on comorbidities. So, it's not really an ageism issue. There are people in their 60s, 70s, 80s who get COVID and emerge completely unscathed because they have no comorbidities. It's not your age, it's the comorbidities. So things, in particular, obesity, which affects about 30% of people now in the US, or being overweight is about 60 or 70%, type 2 diabetes, other forms of kidney disease, heart disease, coronary artery disease, high blood pressure, high lipids. These things, when you take one or more of these things, and pulmonary disease from smoking, if you mix these with COVID, you get horrible outcomes. You get severe disease, you get 10 times higher mortality. It's a bad mix. Even young people who are obese and have comorbidities do poorly with COVID. So with that in mind, the best way to prevent a lot of these comorbidities is through healthy, whole food, plant-based eating, with a smattering of some physical activity, restful sleep, and positive social connections, etc. That's the best way to prevent it. We know that eating whole food plant-based does, at least in the laboratory and blood tests, have some positive effects on your immune system. How much those translate into better COVID responses, we don't know. Anecdotally, I know that since I went whole food plant-based, I almost never get sick. And when I do, it's a very fleeting, mild illness. So I do think it builds resilience. It'll improve your immune system. But most of all, it'll reverse or prevent a lot of these chronic diseases that lead to bad outcomes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm wondering if you could leave our audience today with advice. What would you say to them for people looking to make healthy changes to their diet and lifestyle? What's your top advice?
The top advice, it's like any other change in your life or a habit. There's research that shows that a habit takes 66 days to become ingrained of doing it. That's a long time. It's over 2 months. And I think we often start with very unrealistic goals, expectations. It's not about the outcome. It's not about saying, I want to lose 40 pounds. I want to be whole food plant-based. I want to run a marathon. That's not what it's about. It's about the process. It's about making little changes in your life that then grow. So if it's hard for you to give up meat, have it 3 days a week instead of 7. If you don't like that whole wheat pasta, all right, eat it, once in a while, not all the time. You sort of do what they say is, you praise progress. You come up with little changes that move you in that plant-forward, plant-centered direction, and you see how you do. And often success is, builds on itself and encourages you to do more. So it's having the goals, the right expectations, and learning and reading. There's so many great videos out there that are free. There's great books. I think How Not to Die by Michael Greger is still the Bible here and worth a read. Even if you just go to downstate.edu/plant-based and you click on the conferences, webinars, I've got a series of talks I've done there. We have other materials. We've got myths and facts documents. There's so many myths out there that are just completely nonsense, such as, about protein and fats and other things. But, you praise progress, you embrace the process, not the outcome, you commit to gradual change. And there's a saying from Anthony Trollope that goes, gentle persistence will always beat the labors of a spasmodic Hercules. So the goal is not to be the spasmodic Hercules. It's to be gently persistent with the right process. And if you have a setback, so be it. And also mentoring and coaches are great. Joining a group like yours, Lianna, Plant Powered Metro New York, you align yourself with like minds and you will succeed.
So true. Thank you so much, Dr. Rosenfeld, for your leadership, for your candor, for a lovely conversation today. It's been great to get to know you better and share more about you with our community audience.
I'm honored and thank you. It was a wonderful interview.
Excellent. Thanks so much. And thank you all for joining us. We hope you'll come back next week when we meet cardiac nurse Mary Uter on Wednesday, July 14th, again at noon Eastern. And throughout the series, we'll also be featuring oncologist Dr. Urvi Shah, internist Dr. Michelle McMacken, and psychiatrist Dr. Gia Merlot. If you're intrigued about the whole food plant-based movement for health, please check out our website at www.ppmny.org and access our new recipe app, PPMNY in your kitchen. You can join our virtual and in-person programs, including our upcoming visit to the Ethos Farm Project in Long Valley, New Jersey, on Friday afternoon, July 16th. Be sure to get your tickets by this Friday. And please get in touch with us with your questions. Plant Powered Metro New York is your one-stop shop for information, resources, and action to build healthier plant-powered communities. Have a great day.